question tonight is the murder of a little girl more than 16 years ago. It's a case that has shocked the nation twice. In October 1975, 11-year-old Lesley Molseed was murdered on her way to the local shop. And for some time afterwards, parents everywhere thought twice before letting young children go out alone. Then, last month, came the second shock. Stefan Kiszko, the man convicted of murder years ago, was cleared by the Court of Appeal. He'd spent 16 years in jail for a crime he couldn't possibly have committed. So now the investigation into the murder of Lesley Molseed has reopened. Key witnesses from 1975 have helped us to make this reconstruction. We hear the voice of Lesley's mother, April, but an actress takes her part. With your help tonight, perhaps it's not too late to see justice finally take its proper course. Our film begins in Rochdale in Lancashire on Sunday, October the 5th, 1975.
She loved her music. She liked Bay City Rollers. That was her passion. She used to run around with a tartan scarf tied round her arm, you know, and those Bay City Rollers stocking and whatnot. And her sister used to argue a lot because she was always pinching her sister Laura's Bay City Roller posters, and just a rough, tumble little girl she was. It's just she was exceptionally small, that was all. She looked very delicate, very small. She had open heart surgery when she was about 3, which she came through with flying colours. Everybody knew Lesley. She really was a lovely little girl.
Lesley lived with her mother, stepfather and elder brother and sister on the Turf Hill estate in Rochdale. It's Sunday the 5th of October 1975.
And a very nice record that they've suggested is this one.
Lesley?
Yeah?
Just pop in here a sec, please.
Yeah?
You just go to the shop for me. I only want a loaf of bread. I want an air fresh while you're there.
Okay, I won't be in a minute, bye.
The local spa shop was in Anstall Road, a 10-minute walk away.
Where are you going? I went to the shops. Do you want anything?
No, thanks.
Bernadette Hegarty was 10 years old at the time and lived on the same estate.
I'd known Lesley since we were small. We used to play together. She only lived a couple of doors away. As she was going to the shop that day, I was walking up behind her. We didn't walk up together because we'd fell out at the youth club on Friday over a maxi dress. So Lesley went off up the lane and I went round the other way.
Lesley was never seen again by anyone who knew her. The shopkeeper couldn't be sure that she ever reached the shop. An hour later, a few roads away from the Molseeds' house, Emma Tong was waiting for her son, who'd arranged to take her out for the afternoon.
Through the window, I saw this car with a child sat in the front.
A man in his 30s with thinning, fluffy brown hair got into the car.
It was a dirty, like a beigey colour, with the red round, as though it was ready for respraying. I saw that poster of the little girl when I was going in town, and I thought, sure that's that little girl I saw in that car outside of my house, you know.
By 1:30, Lesley had been gone more than an hour. Laura went to look for her. About 20 minutes' drive from Rochdale is the A672, linking the M62 with Halifax. At about 3:30 that Sunday afternoon, Christopher Coverdale saw something that struck him as odd.
As I came around this particular corner, I saw a man and a young girl on the skyline.
He was quite a large chap, portly, receding hairline.
On a cold, misty October afternoon, it was strange for anyone to want to go walking on the moors. At dusk, just over 2 hours later, Sandra Chapman and her husband were driving past the same spot.
There was a white car in the lay-by and it had all this red primer on it, and I took particular notice because it was parked very tightly in the corner and there was no one around.
3 days later, Lesley's body was found just a few yards from the lay-by. She'd been stabbed repeatedly.
Time, doesn't it?
Well, perhaps tonight, Trevor Wilkinson, someone can help find who did kill Lesley and right that terrible miscarriage of justice.
That's right, Sue. West Yorkshire Police last year, having uncovered the evidence that clearly showed that Stefan Kiszko was not the murderer of Lesley Molseed, we began re-evaluating the evidence that was gathered in 1975. That evidence revealed very striking similarities between the sightings of Emma Tongue and Christopher Coverdale. That last sighting of Christopher Coverdale's was within yards of where Lesley's body was eventually recovered.
What exactly are those similarities that were striking?
In both sightings, the man was, in 1975, believed to be in his 30s. He was wearing a dark brown jacket, lighter coloured trousers, and a light coloured cardigan underneath the jacket. The child's clothing in both sightings was identical to that worn by Lesley. What must now be remembered is that that man would be in his late 40s or in his early 50s now.
And how many people do you have who seem to have seen that white car with the red primer around it?
Apart from the sighting in the lay-by that has been shown tonight, there is 3 sightings in Wellerth Lane near Mrs Tongue's house. 2 of those other sightings, the people are convinced that it was a Vauxhall Viva. One of the people who saw it believe, and he is from the motor trade, believes that it was a 1965 model, and that would mean that it could possibly be on a D plate at that time.
Now, on that afternoon, there was another sighting in that lay-by, it's October the 5th, which could be very significant.
As we passed this lay-by, we saw this ex-GPO van, horrible painted colour, and I just turned around to the door and said, "Oh, look at the colour of that ruddy thing."
Just seeing the van parked there with the rug, you know, all around the windows, that I think made us think that probably somebody was courting.
Now, how important do you think that could be to you?
It's a very important sighting. Mr Jones says that that sighting and that colour of the vehicle is the best one he has seen since 1975. That vehicle we know had been in the lay-by or visited on several occasions between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on that afternoon. It may not be connected with the murder, but it might be somebody who actually was there for other reasons that they couldn't come forward in 1975 who might have seen something very relevant. There was 8,000 inquiries to try and trace that vehicle. It wasn't traced. We asked that person to come forward now who owned the vehicle, who might have seen something. We realised that all the sightings we're asking people to put together, the man, the vehicle and that vehicle, are 16 years old. But what we've been impressed with is the clarity of the memory of people who have come forward since 1975. We actually believe that in 1975 there was a member of the public, and a viewer tonight probably, who had suspicions about a member of the family, a neighbour, a friend, a work associate. And now, since 1975, they may have re-offended. They may have come to notice of the police. They may even be in prison now or have served a prison sentence. We want them to come forward and tell us about that person. They may have been very anxious when the body of Lesley was on the moors that day, that time between the 5th and 8th of October 1975. That anxiety would have been relieved when Mr Kiszko was arrested and eventually convicted. When his appeal was become successful, that anxiety may have returned. We need that phone call. The nightmare that has revisited the Molseed family twice in 16 years needs to be laid to rest. We want a phone call that will give us a key that unlocks this case and finishes their anguish forever, and also Mr Kiszko's.
And this is the number, if you can help, 081 811 8181, here to the studio, or you can contact Bradford Police Station direct. That number is 0800 212 392.
The last 32 years have been horrendous. They still are, and they always will be.
The murder of 11-year-old Lesley Molseed casts a long shadow.
You're numb because you keep coming back to the fact that Lel's never coming home.
It was a horrific crime that destroyed 3 families.
This is the man that had killed my sister, and this is the last face that Lel had seen.
I can't erase the past, I wish I could. It tears me apart some days.
And it played on the mind of one man for more than 30 years.
When he thought the front door was going in his dreams, or he thought there was someone in the garden, he thought they were coming for him.
He lived a very unhappy, deviant and dark life.
The discovery of Lesley Molseed's body here on Rishworth Moor in West Yorkshire was sensational news back in October 1975. And more than 3 decades later, her death was in the headlines again when her murderer was finally brought to justice. But what about the years in between? Well, they were filled with drama and a flawed police investigation that led to one of Britain's most infamous miscarriages of justice. So how did detectives arrest the wrong man, condemning him to prison for a crime he did not commit? And how, so many years later, did police finally identify the real killer? In 1975, the Molseed family were living on the Turf Hill estate in Rochdale. Lesley was the youngest of 4 children. She had a brother, Freddie, and 2 sisters, Julie and Laura.
She was bubbly, so chatty, so full of life, and really was mischievous. One of the most gorgeous little creatures you will ever know.
She was a lovely kid. Beautiful child, really beautiful.
October the 5th began like any other Sunday at number 11 Delamere Road. The children's stepfather, Danny, was at work, and their mum, April, was making a start on lunch.
Through my mind went, oh, you don't have any bread. So I looked at the wee rota and I thought, who's next? And it was Lesley. So I called her in.
Lesley!
I says, Lesley, Dan, will you go and get me a loaf? And she says, yes, no problem.
Don't be long. Okay, Mum.
I was upstairs folding the clothes and I shouted through the window. I said, where you going? I said, to the shop and that. I said, okay, I'll see you.
The last I saw her was at the bottom of the road, turning the corner, and that was the last time I saw my daughter.
Lesley left home at about 12:30. As she headed to the shops, she was spotted by a number of neighbours.
The last sighting of Lesley is probably going into Stayups Lane. Stayups Lane is a high-sided lane that makes its way up to the only shops that would have been open to Lesley for her to go on that day. And I think anybody visiting that scene would say that's a very good point for a possible abduction.
I don't know if it was about half an hour to an hour, and I said to Mum, she's not back. Lel's not back yet, so that's when Mum sent us out to have a look for her.
I was at my boyfriend's and I thought I'll go and visit my mum and that, so I went down to Stipes Lane and I just crossed Turf Hill Road and there was my brother Fred and he was running and I said, oh, where are you off, Fred? He said, oh, Lel went to the shop over an hour ago and she's not come back. So I quickly marched round and my mum was at the gate at that particular time looking out and I said, Mum, what's going on? She looked really drawn, really, really worried.
I was expecting to find her. The fact that I couldn't, you know, the panic set in and I thought, I just never thought I wouldn't find her.
Next thing you know, I bumped into Danny, his stepdad, and we were going down Stipes Lane and he was going absolutely frantic. We were going in and out of gardens, opening up sheds and shouting for her. And then the neighbours got to hear that she'd gone missing and they were coming out.
And you can only imagine the sense of terror that there must have been actually on the estate as the hours unfolded.
She would stop and talk to people and all that, so you could trace Lel's steps by the people that she talked to. But she wasn't talking to anybody.
In the days that followed, as the police search widened, Lesley's family began to fear the worst.
I went into meltdown. I was useless to anybody, even myself. Completely and utterly useless.
I went numb. And although I was only 16 at the time, I knew something bad had happened. And I can always remember it was Tuesday morning, and Mum was upstairs. She was actually sat up in Lel's bed, and she had a whole pair of the old American black and white baseball boots. And she just put them down on the bedside table, and I put the cup of tea there. And she said, "She's never going to wear them again, Julie." And I said, "No, Mum, she's not." And we both burst into tears and just started crying. So we knew then that Lel was never coming home.
Those fears were confirmed 3 days later when Lesley's body was found on Rishworth Moor in West Yorkshire, 10 miles from where she had lived.
She'd been stabbed 12 times, and most of those stab wounds were around the shoulder and upper back area. Some of them were very fierce. The knife had been driven up to the hilt, and one indeed did go through Lesley's heart. She was fully clothed. Her body had possibly been posed. Her knickers were on show, and it was quite apparent there was semen staining on Lesley's vest, on her skirt, and on her knickers.
The details of Lesley's brutal murder spread fear and suspicion through the community.
The rumour would have gone round immediately that a stranger had snatched Lesley off the streets, and then so something approaching some form of hysteria really can build up.
I think inevitably there is a great downward pressure on the officers, on the senior officers, and then down to the officers on the street. They want to get a result. They want to get this person off the street.
As the days and weeks and months went on that Lesley's killer hadn't been caught, then everybody locally became a suspect.
This is not a thing that can be solved quickly unless there is some sudden breakthrough as a result of information from the public.
But with no specific breakthrough, the police turned their attention to anyone in the community who aroused suspicion generally. Their inquiries led them to a 23-year-old Inland Revenue clerk called Stefan Kiszko.
Stefan was the son of Ukrainian migrants, and he was rather a simple soul as a child. He looked odd, he was quite large for his age, he was quite timid, and rather a mummy's boy, really. When he was 18, he was walking home with his father, Ivan, and Ivan collapsed and died in the street. Now, Ivan was about the only male influence on his life, really, and when his father died, Stefan became even closer to his mum and really did cling to her apron strings.
As a social misfit, Kiszko was an easy target for local suspicions, and he'd been accused, wrongly, of indecent exposure by 3 young girls. On December the 21st, 1975, police took him in for questioning about the Molseed murder. Over the next 3 days, he was to become their prime suspect. When 23-year-old Stefan Kiszko was taken in for questioning, police believed they'd found the killer of Lesley Molseed.
He was extremely naive and ingenuous and very trusting. And he would have been very vulnerable at the time of his arrest.
Before the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984, a solicitor did not have to be present when police interviewed a suspect, and Kiszko was questioned without one over the next 3 days.
It was just before Christmas when he was arrested. I think the officers must have thought that Christmas had come a couple of days early. Stefan arrived gift wrapped for them.
None of us were in that room. We don't know what went on, and he did emerge as a good circumstantial local suspect. There was no doubt about that.
While questioning Kiszko, the police made several discoveries which convinced them they had the right man.
The detectives established that he had an apparent interest in pornography, also that he had a medical condition for which he'd been receiving testosterone treatment.
He suffered from something called hypogonadism, which is that the male testes haven't descended, so he's sexually immature, sexually inactive. So the GP just prescribed him testosterone jabs. So he took the jabs in the arm, and it made him sexually active at 23, for the first time ever.
Kiszko told police the injections had triggered new sexual feelings, leading him to buy pornography. But they claimed they'd triggered something much more powerful, uncontrollable sexual urges that had turned him into a child killer.
Tell us where you were.
Then came the moment that sealed Kiszko's fate. Under the pressure of intense questioning, he suddenly confessed to murdering Lesley Molseed.
He seemed to be under the impression that if he admitted it, gave them what they wanted, he would be allowed home and then it would all get sorted out, knowing that he, of course, was innocent. Whatever was going through his mind, it was a dreadful, dreadful mistake.
Finally allowed access to a solicitor, Kiszko retracted his confession, but by then the police had made up their minds, and on Christmas Eve, they charged him with murder. With Kiszko remanded in custody, police were convinced they had the right man behind bars. So they made no connection when another crime happened a few months later, less than a mile from where Lesley had been abducted, even though it bore chilling similarities. On July the 3rd, 1976, part-time taxi driver Ronald Castree was charged with a sexual assault on a young girl, then released on bail. That night, the 22-year-old went home to his wife and told her what he'd done.
It was the early hours of the morning. It was past his shift and everything. And he came in and he said, "Right, you can divorce me now." And I said, "Why would I want to do that?" And he said, "I'm in trouble, Bev. I've interfered with the child. The police have had me in."
It happened in a street in Rochdale's Turf Hill estate, the same area where Lesley Molseed had been abducted before her murder. Two 9-year-old girls were playing together in the street. Despite confusing statements by the pair, police were later able to establish that a man had approached them both in his car. That man was Ronald Castree. One of the girls fled in fear, but Castree managed to get her friend into his car and drove away.
It would appear that the girl was taken to a derelict house, had some of her clothing removed, and that Castree ejaculated and probably had a little girl touch him. So it was a very serious sexual offence.
The girl managed to escape and ran home to tell her mother, who immediately called the police. Castree was arrested and pleaded guilty a week later. But despite the seriousness of the offence, the punishment was shockingly lenient.
It's incredible to think that in July 1976, for an offence of indecent assault and gross indecency on a 9-year-old girl, the penalty at Rochdale Magistrates Court was £25 fine.
Such a light sentence made it easy for Castree's crime to be brushed under the carpet. His protective parents insisted to his confused wife it was an aberration, the result of a breakdown, and completely out of character.
I was shocked, stunned, not quite sure what kind of a person he was, but then again I was only young myself. And to take all that in and have his parents fuss around going, "He'll be all right, Ronnie will be all right," you know, he's seeking treatment and everything, he's just working too hard. And then of course life carried on.
Beverly had met Castree in 1971 when she was just 16 and he was 18. They started dating and within 3 months they were engaged. But even then, it was a far from perfect relationship.
I knew he was seeing other girls even when we were engaged, even before we got married, but they'll deny it, won't they? Till the dying day, till the last breath, they'll deny it. "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, Bev, come back when you do," you know. And then at that age, 16, 17, 18, you think, "Oh, well, he won't do it again," you know. So, stupid here, went and married him at 18, thinking I knew it all. How wrong was I? The violence didn't come out until after we were married. But he did have a fiery temper. Well, I'd never met anyone with such a fiery temper before. One time he picked me up by the breasts and threw me down the corridor. As a result of that, I was all bruised. And that was just one of many incidents recorded on the doctor's records.
Castree's behaviour drove Beverly to have a brief affair of her own, and she fell pregnant by her lover. In September 1975, she gave birth to a son, But a minor complication saw her and the baby readmitted to hospital on October the 3rd, just 2 days before Lesley Molseed's disappearance.
It's probable that Ronald Castree was angry at the birth of his first son that he knew not to be his. He was only 21. His wife was back in hospital and kept in there, so he was home alone. He therefore had the opportunity and maybe a motive.
But at the time, the police weren't examining the opportunities and motives of others. They were focused solely on Stefan Kiszko, whose trial for Lesley Molseed's murder began on July the 7th, 1976.
The first time I actually saw Stefan Kiszko was at the murder trial in 76. And I can remember looking down on him and thinking, God, he's so tall, he was so big. How could he have done that to my sister?
Kiszko now vehemently denied any involvement in the murder, but his lawyers knew it was going to be hard to undo the damage done by his initial confession. As a result, they decided to run 2 alternative defence arguments. The first was that their client hadn't committed the murder. The second was that if he had done, it was due to mental illness brought on by the testosterone injections he'd been receiving.
As I understand it, the specialist who had actually prescribed those drugs was available to the defence, and he'd made it clear to them that that was arrant nonsense.
But this was ignored in the defence claim of diminished responsibility, which to the jury may have appeared as effectively an admission of guilt.
It seems to me that once the defence were pushing that to the forefront of the mind of the jury, then the jury, like the public, would think that they'd got the right man.
2 weeks later, the jury at Leeds Crown Court rejected both defence arguments and returned a verdict of guilty. Stefan Kiszko was sentenced to life in prison.
Stefan was already being escorted back down the stairs. The court was in an uproar.
In my eyes, that this was the person that had killed my sister Lil, and that's where he should be, in prison, and I never wanted him to get out.
It's something you just can't put into words. You're numb because you keep coming back to the fact that Lel's never coming home. And he, Stefan, was the last face that she'd seen, and all these things were going through your mind.
Kiszko was taken to Armley Prison in Leeds to begin his life sentence as a convicted child murderer.
He went through horrendous experiences in prison in terms of bullying other inmates. And of course, the one thing they always said to him was, the only way that you'll ever get parole is if you confess to this murder. And that you did in 1975, and Kiszko would never ever admit to it.
He was physically and verbally abused, and abused in all sorts of unpleasant ways. And the effect of those experiences were to make him ill, and gradually he became more and more mentally ill.
In May 1978, Kiszko's appeal was rejected. Isolated in prison for his own protection, he now faced the prospect of a life behind bars. But his mother Charlotte refused to give up hope and waged a one-woman campaign to prove her son was innocent.
This is one determined little lady. She was going to have a day when her son would walk out of jail. No matter how long it took, she would, fight and fight and fight.
British justice, we always say, is the best, and it lets you so down.
She was passionately determined to find somebody who would prove her son's innocence.
Charlotte Kiszko contacted anyone she believed could possibly help her cause, including Mrs. Thatcher and the Queen. She finally found a sympathetic ear in solicitor Campbell Malone.
The more that I looked at the case, and the more that I spoke to other people who'd also looked at the case, the more I just developed the feeling that there was something terribly wrong.
There was one man, though, who knew for certain that Kiszko was innocent, but he remained silent. By the mid-1980s, Ronald Castree and his wife Beverly had 3 children, but the appearance of conventional family life disguised a catalogue of abuse.
I'd describe my dad as being split personality. He'd be all right to everybody outside, but to us it'd be psychological violence towards me, physical violence towards my mum.
He had to tread around on eggshells all the time, and he did have guns for a certain amount of time. And by this time he drank an awful lot.
He'd down a bottle of whiskey a night, and then mixed with painkillers as well. It was like a time bomb waiting to go off.
He was totally weird in the bedroom department. He had washing lines, canes, box of tricks, you know.
He always had a keen interest in schoolgirls, and he wanted my mum to dress up in schoolgirls' uniforms, and because my mum wasn't that way inclined, he'd openly say in front of us kids, well, I'll go out and find someone to do it. So that'd lead him to prostitution.
Castree was a regular user of prostitutes over the years, but there was a much darker side to his sexual fantasies, which had disturbing echoes of his previous conviction.
The family holidays were taken at the same place. We went there for a number of years. We didn't realise why in the beginning. It was only as the boys got older we all realised together that he was taking an interest in the young girls.
He'd send us lads off swimming, and he'd be stood there in the pool, main pool, ogling at the girls.
One time we were quite close to another couple and their two daughters, and he made them feel so uncomfortable they moved.
You cringe, you're embarrassed, you just want to curl up and die.
Ronald Castree may have been enjoying his freedom, but without his knowledge, events were unfolding that would soon put him in fear. The man doing time for the murder he had committed was about to be declared innocent. When Stefan Kiszko was convicted of Lesley Molseed's murder in 1976, there seemed no doubt that a dangerous killer had been put behind bars. But Kiszko's mother, Charlotte, fought tirelessly to prove his innocence, enlisting the support of solicitor Campbell Malone. His efforts led to West Yorkshire Police re-examining the case in 1991. They uncovered crucial evidence that had been locked away in the archives of the Forensic Science Service for 16 years. And it would cast dramatic new light on the case.
The police came to see us, and they gave us a background as to what the new evidence was, that the world was led to believe was new evidence.
What the police had discovered were notes taken by a forensic scientist at the time of the original inquiry.
What we know now, and what should have been known then, and possibly may have been known then, was that the semen taken from Stefan did not match the semen which was found on the body.
Stefan Kiszko had a condition by which he could never produce sperm heads in his semen. Never. It was always known from the early days of 1975, from the first examinations, that the semen staining on Lesley did contain sperm heads. It would appear that that matter didn't get an airing that it should have done at Leeds Crown Court.
Stefan Kiszko had been cheated out of 16 years of his life. This vital piece of evidence would have proved his innocence beyond doubt, but was not disclosed by police and was never asked for by the defence. The forensic scientist and the surviving senior police officer were later charged with perverting the course of justice, but the case against them was dropped on the grounds that the passage of time made a fair trial impossible.
I think that as an investigation it was at the least incompetent. I fear it may have been something worse. I have no reason to believe that the officers targeted and then pursued somebody they knew to be innocent. I think they'd become convinced by everything they saw about Stefan that they'd got the right man, and they didn't want to know about anything that didn't fit that.
For Stefan Kiszko, 16 years of wrongful imprisonment came to an end on February the 17th, 1992, when the Court of Appeal finally quashed his conviction.
I've never had an emotion like that before or since. And I knew it was coming. It wasn't as though there was any doubt about the verdict. But it had been so long, and there'd been so much suffering for Stefan and his family. It was a physical sensation that I was only just able to control.
But the years of incarceration had taken their toll on Kiszko's physical and mental health.
It's been a nightmare situation, to be honest with you. Prison's been very difficult. The whole situation in the police station was a very difficult one, and the whole situation just has been intolerable.
He struggled when he came out. He had a lot of difficulty coping.
I feel angry towards the police, the way they handled all of this.
Why?
Because they should never have arrested me. They should have arrested the right person.
People were extraordinarily nice with him, and the nicer they were, the harder he found it, because it brought it all back.
What are your hopes now for the future?
My hopes for the future are to get married, go on holiday and enjoy my life as much as I can.
It was not to be. On December the 23rd, 1993, 18 months after his release, Stefan Kiszko suffered a heart attack and died. His mother, Charlotte, died 4 months later.
I felt they were cheated. I would have liked them to have had longer together. Before she died, Charlotte said to me that I was to promise not to let people forget Stefan's name or what was done to him. I will always try to keep by that promise.
For the family of Lesley Molseed, Kiszko's release marked the beginning of a new ordeal.
I'd hated this man for so long, and now they're telling me that this man hadn't done it, and there was somebody else out there who had actually killed Lel, and I couldn't accept it.
Even to this day, it's still there. You know, I had 16 years of living where Kiszko killed my daughter, and it's still, everybody, you know, people keep talking about, oh, you want a poor lad and all that. I kind of get that.
I'm very upset about Kiszko serving 16 years in prison for the murder he didn't do. There's somewhere out there there's a man who killed my sister, and the police, I hope to God they catch him, because I'll never rest until they do.
None of us will rest.
None of us, in fact, will rest.
It brought it to the forefront of my mind, what had happened to Lel, what she'd gone through. So you started all over again. Lel, bless her cotton socks, had been murdered again.
I appeal to any person who has any information that could assist the police in any way to come forward. 2 families have been the victims of this murder, mine and Mr. Kiszko. And if anybody can help our anguish over Lesley's murder, please come forward.
A new hunt to find Lesley's killer was now underway.
The first thing you do is clear the ground from under your feet. So you go back to 1975 and you say, well, what evidence, what information did we have at that time? And a number of potential suspects emerged from that data trawl.
Several men were questioned by police, but by the mid-90s the investigation had stalled. Desperate to see the killer brought to justice, Lesley's family took to the streets with their own campaign to remind people of the little girl who had been murdered back in 1975.
People forget at times that that little girl is dead. I mean, she's my little girl, and I think about her day in and day out. This man has got to be brought to justice.
With such a frustrating lack of progress, West Yorkshire Police launched a cold case review under the leadership of Detective Chief Superintendent Max McLean.
We always knew that this was a very sensitive and important case for West Yorkshire Police. We knew that we, amongst others, had got it badly wrong in 1975, and it was something that meant a lot to us. We knew we couldn't turn the clock back, but we desperately wanted to try and put it right. And the way in which we could do that was, of course, by finding the real killer.
Aware of how badly let down by the police Lesley's family felt, one of McLean's first priorities was to go and meet them and attempt to win back their trust.
I can remember realising the importance of the first impressions we gave to April and other members of Lesley's family.
I told Mr. McLean that I didn't think I would ever see the killer of Lesley in my lifetime. And he said, yes, you will.
I remember introducing Sergeant Hepworth, Veronica Hepworth, as the family liaison officer.
That was a very, very interesting meeting, to say the least. April, first words to me was, well, you've got your work cut out, girl.
So we knew that the reputation of West Yorkshire Police wasn't at its highest with Lesley's family.
Lacking any new lines of inquiry, McLean was determined to leave no stone unturned.
I went up to Wetherby Laboratory and I spoke to scientists up there about the potential for reviewing the forensic evidence in the case. And we established that there was only one thing remaining in all the exhibits, in all the case, and that was an envelope, and that envelope contained some sellotape tapings.
At the time of the original examination, the surface of Lesley Molseed's clothing would have been taped, so they would have got strips of sellotape and pressed them down onto the garments and lifted them off to collect any fibres that might have transferred to them.
The discovery was fortunate, and it had the potential to be hugely significant.
We knew at that time semen had been found on Lesley Molseed's pants, so there were some thoughts around, is there a possibility that some of the semen could have also lifted off onto the sellotape?
And it was put to me that it might be possible to extract that semen and obtain a DNA profile.
But it was by no means a certainty. This was uncharted territory for the Forensic Science Service. A DNA profile had never been obtained in this way before, so scientists experimented with dummy strips of sellotape. Once confident of their method, they went to work on the originals. They only had one chance to do it right, as the process would destroy the tape. Their first success came with the discovery of sperm heads in the material they'd extracted from the tape. Then came the result police and forensic scientists had hoped for: a DNA profile of the killer of Lesley Molseed.
This was such a big breakthrough. This was a case that at that time was 25 years old. It was the oldest case that we'd ever worked on, and it was the first time this type of technology had been applied to that type of retained material, so it really was very, very exciting.
Police began collating DNA samples, keeping the existence of this crucial new piece of information secret so as not to alert the killer. But as the months and then years passed and no match was found, the family's hopes began to fade.
I thought, we are never going to find out who it is. Why is he not in the database? Has he thought, oh, cocky, got away with killing our Lel?
If you're over the age of about 30, the name Lesley Molseed may be familiar to you. Her face became a poignant symbol of child murder.
In February 2003, Max McLean used a television appeal to publicly announce the existence of the DNA profile for the first time.
All we need is a name. After 28 years, we will never have a better chance of catching the killer of Lesley Molseed.
That was hugely successful in terms of public response, but of course it didn't give us the name of Ronald Charles Edward Castree.
Since 1990, Castree had been running a comic book shop in Ashton-under-Lyne. At the time, his chosen business raised no suspicions, but his motives have now been cast in a new light.
We wonder whether that particular type of occupation does give him access to children and to the world of fantasy.
It was his cover. He was a well-known businessman, respected, but then he had a dark secret.
After Lesley's murder, you see that he lived a very unhappy, deviant and dark life. I think that tells a lot about the man.
Throughout the years he was very jumpy, and we could never fathom out why. In the middle of the night he would leap out of bed and, "Bev, there's someone in the garden."
He was always paranoid, he was always on edge.
I believe that in his mind, on all these occasions when he thought the front door was going in his dreams, or he thought there was someone in the garden, he thought they were coming for him. And then when we had horrendous arguments over things, I'd say, what is the matter with you? And he'd go, if only you knew, Bev. I never suspected. And I'd say, if only I knew what? And he'd go, leave it, Bev, leave it. You're like a dog with a bone. Just leave it.
Castree's 26-year marriage to Beverly finally ended in 1997. By then, he had evaded justice for 22 years, and he must have believed the police would never catch up with him. But as he began his new life, his dark sexual secrets and his use of prostitutes were to prove his undoing.
"30 years after the murder of Lesley Molseed, West Yorkshire police had a DNA profile of her killer, but no match. Then, on October the 1st, 2005, Ronald Castree was accused of rape by a prostitute and later arrested. Although the police didn't charge him, new laws allowed them to take a routine DNA swab. And this was the moment when Castree's lifetime of lies finally unravelled. When the Forensic Science Service next ran the DNA profile of Lesley's killer through the database, they discovered they had a perfect match.
I got a phone call from Kathy Turner at the lab, who asked me if I was sitting down, and at first what she told me didn't sink in. And she said the name of Ronald Castree, and it didn't mean at that time anything to me.
I was very quickly briefed on a couple of very important factors about Ronald Castree. He lived locally, only 3/4 of a mile away from where Lesley was probably abducted. He had a conviction for a sexual offence that was quite similar in its method used to the abduction and killing of Lesley, and that he was a taxi driver and therefore had access to vehicles. So there was 3 very important factors that were immediately brought to my attention and of course were of great interest to us. The DNA match really was just the start of the research work that we had to then undertake and prove that Lesley Molseed had been killed by Ronald Castree.
By November the 5th, 2006, the police were convinced that at long last they had the right man. They were ready to make their arrest.
Are you Ronald Charles Edward Castree? I am. Right, listen very carefully to what I've got to say to you now. You were under arrest for the murder of Lesley Susan Molseed.
You're joking.
Between 12 noon on Sunday, the 5th of October 1975 and 06:45 a.m. on Wednesday the 8th of October 1975. Do you understand the caution?
Yes, I understand the caution.
Your arrest is necessary for the prompt and effective investigation of the offence.
It's ridiculous.
That same morning, Lesley's family were told the news they'd waited more than 30 years to hear.
Oh my God, don't know what to say to you. It was just, my God, I can't believe it. Are you sure? Are you 100% sure this is the man?
I was over the moon. I really was.
Gobsmacked, I think, is a term I would use. I don't think April ever thought that she would see a positive match to the DNA profile in her lifetime.
But there was another family for whom news of the arrest was a devastating blow.
When they said that, we've got your dad on suspicion of murder, my world just fell apart.
I said, are you sure? And they went, as sure as we'll ever be. And then I felt incredibly angry with him, you know. I thought, oh, all them years, you know, and I've lived with you and covered it up. We've been a cover-up, all of us.
Did you kill Lesley Susan Molseed?
I did not.
Do you know anything about the murder?
No. Well, only what I've read at the time.
Castree was very nervous and agitated in the interviews.
I have no knowledge. I've certainly never met this dead girl or any member of her family. I have no knowledge as to how you come to say a sample of my DNA is found at that place, especially after 30 years.
He never offered a rational, reasonable, plausible explanation.
Ronald Castree was charged with Lesley's murder the following day. His trial began at Bradford Crown Court almost a year later, on October the 22nd, 2007.
I so wanted this. I wanted to look at him. I wanted to, this is the man that had killed my sister. And this is the last face that Lel had seen and what he'd done to her. And I was so ready for it.
He sat there with his glasses on the end of his nose, like he used to do when we were growing up, arms folded, and he showed no remorse whatsoever.
The trial brought two families, both destroyed by Ronald Castree, face to face for the first time.
We all thought that the thing with the scum of the earth. At the end of the day, I'm still walking, I'm still alive. I'm his son and I'm still alive. How dare I be? But when we met Lesley's family, there were no animosity there.
Our biggest fear as a family was that Beverly knew what Castree had done, and we were really apprehensive about that. It meant a lot to us, because you do hear that the wife knows, and the police reassured us that she didn't, so our guard went down and our hearts just go out to them.
They all put their arms round us, and they said, "You go out there, Bev, you've done no wrong. You go out there and hold your head up."
At the end of the third week, the jury were sent out to reach their verdict.
I felt physically sick. I knew this was it. Make or break, this was it.
I thought I was going to pass away. It was so tense.
I remember sitting and simply putting my face to the floor, listening. I don't think I looked at the foreman of the jury at the time he gave the verdict. And when he said guilty, it was just a fabulous feeling of relief, I think, really.
I could feel the tension going out of my body.
My first memories of April, Laura and Julie letting out a gasp of yes, and the very obvious look of elation on their faces. And that was a very proud moment.
All I heard was guilty. And it was just like a weight being lifted off my shoulders.
Oh, thank God. Because right up until that last second, there was just that little inkling. We thought, he's going to get off, he's going to get away with it. He's crafty.
We are relieved that after so long, our quest for justice for Lesley is now over. It has been a long and harrowing ordeal, and our gratitude to the friends, family, and strangers throughout the world who have given us their support is immense.
Ronald Castree was sentenced to life in prison and told he must serve a minimum of 30 years.
I would like to think that the conviction of Ronald Castree demonstrates that West Yorkshire Police do get the man. We knew how badly things had gone wrong in the past, so to finally take such a strong case to Bradford Crown Court and to say, here we are now, 2007 as the conviction was, we're still at this, we're still looking for the man, and we've convicted him. That meant a lot to us.
I have nothing but contempt for Ronald Castree. He has ruined the lives of Lesley's family. He's ruined the lives of his own family, and that's Stefan Kiszko's.
You wonder how anybody could live knowing that he'd killed a child, and knowing that he'd seen somebody else go to prison for 16 years for that. It must have had an effect on him.
I can't change who my dad is. I wish I could, but I can't. I can't erase the past. I wish I could. It tears me apart some days.
The only thing we can do is take one day at a time. If people can try and understand that we weren't any part of Ron's sick life, we were just innocent victims, same as everybody else, and give us a chance to rebuild our lives.
For Lesley's family, after such a long fight for justice, it's hard to face the future.
When Lesley died, I died. A living kind of a death. I just completely and utterly killed every emotion that I had. And I'm still the same today.
I'm not the person I was born to be. I had to learn to live, deal with very horrific things, and it does do something to you.
There's no closure. There never will be closure. Just the satisfaction that he is behind bars, he's not going to do this to anybody else, and he has been caught.
We have to process the last 32 years, and Arlella's never going to come home. No matter how you play this, she'll never come home.
So, can Theo Walcott kick Arsenal to another victory? We'll find out tomorrow night. UEFA Champions League action versus FC Porto, here on ITV1 at 7:30. Coming next tonight, though, it's police camera action.
Sir, we've done it.
Do you want to write it, or do you want me to write it for you?
You write it. I'm all upset.
Let's start with where you met the little girl. Just remember, details are important.
You have to call my mother, she'll come and take me home. Hello? My mother has to come and get me. He said I could go home. He said I could go home for Christmas.
Sheila saw me go up and she said, oh, Sheila, you know how we have to die, Papa, and
Even as a baby, you could see he had a gift. Not from me, from his father. God bless him. He had a wonderful ear, just like Stefan. He would be so proud to see his son play, and so happy too.
Hi, Stefan. Hey. This new rebate, if they're not eligible to complete an R6, what do I send them?
A T2S, an 11p, or the bottom half of a 104, depending on whether they're married, single or dead.
You should put your brain inside that computer they're threatening us with.
He hides his talents.
If they knew you spoke 3 languages and up the ladder, you'd go.
Yes, Stefan. And your music, reading and playing.
Auntie, I'm with the Inland Revenue. Accident. Accident. It was an accident. The whole realm of nature mine, that
Offering far too small, love
so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my
Let us pray.
Thank you so much. Please come to tea.
She's 10, maybe 12 years old. First look says she's been here about 3 days. And she's been stabbed. A lot.
Get yourself down on the roadway. I don't want to see any vehicles pulling in. Move! Come on, now!
She was found by a motorist who slept overnight in his van down there in the lay-by. Timing and description match a Lesley Molseed. She went missing on Sunday.
Ah, you spoil me. Thank you.
Wait, let me take it back, sir. Whatever it is. This thing was vanished in front of your very eyes. I never know the slightest clue where it's gone. What? Look, it's gone! I don't know where it is, dear. Where? How do we are now? Other one? No, look at that there. This one? How's that? How's that?
Stefan Kiszko?
Yes?
I've received a complaint that a man fitting you a description indecently exposed himself on the afternoon of Saturday, the 4th of October in Vavasour Street.
Nonsense. Ridiculous. He would never do such a thing. Never. Who is saying this?
Mr. Kiszko, can you tell me where you were and what you did on Saturday, the 4th of October?
He would never do a thing like that. Never.
Do you think you could have been in the vicinity of Vavasour Street at approximately 2:45 p.m. on Saturday, the 4th of October?
Who is saying this? Who?
A Saturday, you said? Well, that was an whole month ago.
Just try and think it through. The afternoon.
Well...
He couldn't have done it. I remember where he was. He was in the hospital. He had an operation on his foot. He was in the hospital, so... You have come to the wrong house. You remember the balloons?
Still in car.
Good afternoon, sir. Detective Sergeant Ackroyd.
Mum! 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 My mother's not here. You'll have to come back later.
It was you we wanted to have a word with, sir. Have we come at an inconvenient moment?
It's just that your lot have already been here, accusing me of things I haven't done and upsetting my mother.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Would you like to tell us all about it?
I've got a job. I'm a civil servant.
The two officers who were here before wanted to know where you were on the 4th of October.
My mother's already told them. I was at the hospital. I had an operation on my foot.
I'm actually investigating the murder of a little girl which occurred the following day, 5th of October. Were you still in hospital then?
Yeah, I suppose so. I've got a discharge letter from the hospital. I'll go and find it.
Watch the front door.
Can't find it. I'll make a phone call. A friend might know. Hello? This is Stefan. The police are here again. Mother's very upset. Can you remember what day I came out of hospital? Oh. I see. Thank you. Bye. Can't remember. It's just that now I'm supposed to have killed a little girl.
All this is nonsense. Nonsense. Who is saying these things against us? Who?
Just making a few inquiries, Mrs. Kiszko, that's all.
We've already answered everything. He wasn't there. He couldn't have done anything.
Yeah, we checked with the hospital, and the record shows that your son was in fact discharged from hospital 3 weeks before the incidents we're investigating. Mr. Kiszko, is there anyone apart from your mother who can confirm your whereabouts on the 4th and 5th of October?
He wouldn't be with anyone but me.
I'd like you to come down to the police station, Mr. Kiszko.
No. This is madness. Look what you're doing to him.
It's very cold outside. Perhaps you'd like to get your coat.
Mom. Stefan, you'll see. You'll see. We'll go down and we'll sort it all out.
It's your son we want to talk to, Mrs. Kiszko.
I will come too.
No. We need to talk with him alone.
I must have been at home the whole time. I'd just come out of the hospital. And anyway, I couldn't have done anything like what you're saying. That's why I've been having these injections.
What injections?
Well, I don't fancy girls.
What do you mean you don't fancy girls?
When I was in the hospital, this doctor gave me some injections. You know, to bring me on a bit.
You're telling me you're impotent?
Yes. That's why I couldn't have done any of these things. Can I go home now?
Listen, I just want to see him. Why not? Because he was probably less spoken
These were found in your car. Under the carpet in the boot. Are they yours?
Yes.
You told us you had no interest in girls whatsoever. So why have you got these in your car?
It's those injections. I never did anything like this before.
Anything like what? Empty your pockets on the table, please.
I already did it.
Do it again. What do you use this knife for?
Well, I always carry a knife.
A lot of men carry a knife. So can you tell me why you carry two knives?
One's for cutting string and the other's for cleaning the car battery.
You lied about the indecent exposure. You lied about being in hospital. You lied about not liking girls. One way or another, we're going to get the fucking truth out of you.
How much longer, please? A terrible mistake has been made. My son is from a good family. Just look at us. He can't be alone like this. He needs me.
I've already told you, Mrs. Kiszko, that is not
Please,
possible.
could I see the policeman in charge?
Look, if you go home now, I'll ask him to come and see you.
Is he a good man?
Yes.
What's the point of carrying balloons around in your car other than to attract children?
Christmas. For decorations.
And the sweets?
I eat a lot of sweets.
We know you wanked all over it. We know!
Thank you for coming. She has been so anxious to talk with you.
Oh, good. You'll have tea. Alfreda? Yes. And something to eat, Inspector?
Mrs. Kiszko.
I pray you come to sort out this terrible mistake. Some of your policemen have made a terrible mistake.
Mrs. Kiszko, why did you lie when you said your son was in hospital?
I was confused.
Sir? One was in the cupboard, the other under the bed. I've got a feeling this one's getting itself wrapped up for Christmas.
All the knives belonged to my father. All of them. I kept them to remind me of him. Sort of keepsakes.
These vehicle numbers written down on scraps of paper found in your car.
I've already been through that.
Well, let's go over it again.
I was run off the road once by a van. I reported it to the police. They told me to write down the number of any suspicious-looking vehicles.
Well, you never gave them the numbers. Tell me about this number here, the one written in red. ADK 539L. Well, is it your writing?
Must be.
And is that your paper?
Yes.
Try and tell me why you wrote that number down. Because the owner of that car lives miles away from you, and as far as he knows, he's never come into contact with you. And it just so happens that at 2:30 p.m., on Sunday the 5th of October, he drove that car past the scene of the murder. If you wrote that number down, you must have been there. Or written it down on your journey there when you had the little girl with you. Your mother lied to us. She said you were in hospital and you weren't. You were out on the streets and you took that little girl. Now, come on, your mother can't help you now. We found fibres. Fibres on that child's clothing. Fibres from the carpets in your car. She must have picked them up when you drove off with her. The suspect was seen to be visibly shaking.
Hello, Kiszko.
I'm worried about my mother. Very worried. She's only got me. She can't be on her own for Christmas. My Auntie Frida will go around, but it won't be the same for her.
Of course it won't. She'll want you there. That's what Christmases are all about. Families. Getting together.
So it needs sorting out. We have to go home.
We could all go home if you told us the truth.
This is terrible. With all those damn injections. All this would never have happened.
What would never have happened?
That little girl I picked up. Lesley. I don't know what happened. It's all hazy.
When did you pick Lesley up?
On that Sunday dinner time. The day I killed her.
Are you telling me you murdered Lesley Molseed?
Yes. I killed that little girl. Come and take me off.
And I need some pubic hair as well. Drop your trousers.
But when can I go home? For Christmas?
And I also need some seminal fluid. So if you could masturbate and ejaculate into this, I'll leave you on your own for that. Stefan Kiszko.
The main interview room, Mr. Wright.
My son is not a criminal. He is not a criminal. No, please.
Just sit down, Mrs. Kiszko.
to make another statement, retracting your confession.
I just said those things to get them off my back. I thought if I told them what they wanted, they'd let me out.
And as well as the murder, you also confessed to exposing yourself. On 2 separate occasions.
I may have done once, but only once. And it was an accident. I just wasn't zipped up properly. Could have happened to anyone. And I don't know where they got that other one from. I just went along with what I thought they wanted to hear, but they still wouldn't let me go. They needed all those tests.
Whoever killed the girl masturbated over her body. They want to check your sperm against the sperm they found on her clothes. Do you understand?
Yes. So can I go home now?
Mr. Outridge. Kiszko results, sir.
Which ones?
Semen staining on the child's clothing. And that's an analysis of semen provided by Kiszko.
Right. Well, we'll need copies sent over to the inquiry team.
Stefan Ivan Kiszko. You are charged that you, on or about the 5th of October 1975, did unlawfully kill Lesley Molseed, which is contrary to common law. Do you have anything to say?
No reply.
I signed. I don't know what I signed, but I didn't kill that little girl. Hab ich nicht.
Verwissen es.
Ich wollte doch nur nach Hause gehen.
Sie werden bald sehen, als einen schrecklichen gemacht haben.
Speak in English. English. Do you understand?
Yes, yes. You look terrible. So food's bad.
It's all right.
Have you looked up with these others?
Mr. Wright says an alibi is the best defense.
But I was with you.
I tell them over and over, every Sunday, the same thing. Church, visit your father's graves and lunch.
I can't stay in here. I haven't done anything.
Mr. Wright has said he'll get you the best defense lawyer, Stefan.
A trial? I'll be on trial.
It won't come to that. They'll see their mistake before that. Yes.
Mrs. Kiszko, we did say last time you came that you had to have an appointment. Mr. Wright does have other clients.
But I have only one son on trial for a crime he did not do.
Please, we told the police about these carpets, but they were not interested. These are the carpets that Stefan had in his car at the time of the murder. Look, see, they are all worn and dirty.
They're making tests on the wrong pieces. The carpet they took from his car in December were new ones. They were not in his car at the time of the murder. These were in his car at the time of the murder. Mr. Wright must tell them, please, yes. Thank you.
How are you feeling, Stefan?
Nervous. Very nervous.
Now you remember Mr. Waddington. He's going to represent you.
And how have they been treating you, Stefan? Food okay?
It's not too bad.
I've gone over all the facts again, and I've very carefully considered the evidence that the prosecution are going to give to the jury. And I want you to consider pleading guilty. We can argue for the charge to be reduced to manslaughter on the basis that due to the testosterone injections you received for your sexual problem, you were somewhat out of control and thus of diminished responsibility.
But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Yes, all right then.
This is a very sad story. The story of a once harmless but emotionally and physically retarded young man. A young man whose sexuality was abruptly activated by medication, resulting in him embarking upon a series of escalating sexual forays, culminating in the abduction and brutal murder of an innocent little girl. A murder to which the accused confessed, and you will be shown that it was a confession of such detail it could only have come from the murderer himself.
It will become clear to you that the evidence put forward by the prosecution is entirely circumstantial, and that the nub of their case is the alleged confession the defendant made. Now, you might ask yourself, why on earth should a man confess to a killing he has not perpetrated? But you will hear evidence to show how unusual Stefan Kiszko was, how he was utterly dependent on his mother, and that he made a confession to murder in order to be reunited with her.
But murder was only part of the defendant's confession. He also admitted to 2 counts of indecent exposure.
We'd just got to the youth club, and he jumped out, opened his coat, and his trousers fell down. His thing was sticking out.
And then he said, "When I get you 2 bastards, I'll shove this up you."
He unzipped his trousers and took it out.
Then I heard him shout, "Come here, let me round this up you."
There seems to be no relevance at all in any of these prosecution witnesses, my lord, as not one of these young girls has been able to give a consistent description of the man who exposed himself.
But if it please the court, my lord, on the next day, the 4th, there was another incident which occurred in broad daylight.
And he was in front of us, just staring at us. Then he lifted up his parka and exposed himself.
And is that man in the courtroom now, Maxine?
Yes.
May the court please note after the accused stated he had no interest in girls whatsoever, where did you find these men's magazines?
Hidden under the carpet, in the boot of the accused's car, sir.
There were no signs of sexual assault, but on examination of the clothes, the knickers, and the skirt, there were light semen stains.
How would those stains have got there?
Well, the opinion I reached was that whoever murdered the child masturbated over her.
So the murder had a sexual basis?
In my opinion, yes.
Dear Mum and Auntie Frida, I have never been so humiliated and embarrassed as I have been in the last 2 days. The prosecution really went downtown with the good name I once had, trying to imply that I was some sort of sex maniac. And the newspapers have had a field day with my name. Sex jab man turned killer, court told.
And I asked him, what was the point of carrying balloons and sweets in your car other than to attract children? We know that the car in question passed the scene of the murder at approximately 2:30 p.m. And I suggested to him that he must have been there to write down that particular car number.
I put sellotape over the girl's garments so that any loose foreign fibers would be picked up.
Did you discover any?
Yes. On the jumper, the vest, skirt, and from one sock. They were similar to fibers to be found in the carpet, which was taken from the accused's car.
What were your conclusions?
Well, that the murdered girl had been a passenger in the car.
Thank you.
Would it be true to say that very considerable quantities of this carpeting must have been manufactured?
I'm not sure what the quantities would be, but I examined 30 other cars in the course of this investigation, and there was nothing to link them with the girl's clothing.
From what I have seen of Mr. Justice Parks, he hasn't really missed anything that has been going on. And in all fairness, I can say that the prison officers that I have been in contact with have shown no disrespect towards me, nor have they mistreated me in any physical way or caused disgrace to the uniform that they are wearing. And as I have said, I must put my faith and trust in British justice and the British Bobby who never lies and always tells the truth.
It's so stacked against him. I mean, he just looks the part.
Well, he's on defence. We're trying to get him to plead guilty.
There you go.
Excuse me.
Orange juice, please. Here you go.
And she admits to hearing every word, yes?
Yes, Your Lordship. I cautioned her not to say anything to other members of the jury.
Well, I think we can assume that the juror thought that you were talking about Mr. Waddington discussing the possibilities of Kiszko pleading guilty to manslaughter, not murder, yes? I mean, we're nearly through the damn thing now, yes? I don't see any grounds for a mistrial. Mr. Taylor?
No.
Mr. Waddington?
Now, let's go over that again. The part of your confession concerning the indecent exposures. There was a disco going on at the youth club, and 2 girls came down the road. Something came over me, and I unzipped my trousers and got my penis out. How could you have made this statement if you hadn't been there, and you knew nothing about a youth club or a disco?
The officers told me about it.
Something came over me. The officers told you to say that too?
No. That bit just came into my head.
Now, when you confessed to killing the girl, you gave very accurate details of where you picked her up. How were you able to do that?
Because Inspector Holland had said it.
Said what exactly?
Well, like, wasn't it Broad Lane where you picked her up? I just said yes to go along with it, to get out of there.
Then there's your description of the scene of the murder. You were able to tell police that you took the girl up a grass bank. It wasn't very high, and then it went flat. Again, how could you have given such an accurate, detailed description if you hadn't been there?
They just kept asking me questions like, was it steep, was it flat? I just picked an answer.
But you picked all the right answers. And as to the details of the murder itself, can you tell the court why you were able to describe so accurately what occurred? The fact that the murderer masturbated over the young girl's body.
I told you. One of the policemen had already shouted it. We know you wanked all over her.
But even if that were true, what you said in your statement was, I shot between her legs over her knickers. Exactly where the forensic tests showed seminal staining. I put it to you once again. How could you have possibly known?
I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home.
But you originally told police officers that your son was in hospital, and then, when you were confronted with the truth, you went on to change your story.
He did not do this.
So I put it to you that your accounts to the police as to where your son was on the day of the murder changed, until finally you both managed to agree on an alibi that would seem credible in court.
That is not what happened. And he was always with me.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kiszko. Mrs. Kiszko, you may stand down now.
What I want to do, with your permission, is to argue diminished responsibility.
Stefan, do you remember the injections you had? We can use those in your defense.
Anything that helps. Good man. Now, do you also remember we had a Dr. Tosh come and talk to you?
Michael Austin Tosh.
A consultant psychiatrist, having special experience in the diagnosis and treatment of psychiatric disorders.
Yes, I am.
Now, for argument's sake, I want you to assume the defendant is guilty and that his confession statement is correct. So, when you met the defendant, did he strike you as having a normal personality?
I think of Kiszko as a fat, socially withdrawn, socially inept, mother-fixated, unhappy person. Dim, socially. Dim, not knowing where to put himself. Not able to form relationships.
Would you care to speculate as to the effect on him of a fairly large dose of the male sex hormone? Would he have been emotionally prepared for this sudden appearance of sex drive?
Not at all. It would have been completely foreign to him.
Assuming he killed, do you consider he would have been fully responsible for what he did?
No. I would have considered him to have been in a state of sexual exaltation, which first allowed him to approach the little girl. I would then speculate some sort of rejection or fighting took place. Careless words on behalf of the little girl could have been the trigger to promote the frenzied attack upon her.
Like you're a dirty old man?
Something of the sort, or you ought to be locked up. Something like that.
Stefan, I really must urge you to change your plea to guilty before the judge sums up.
I didn't do it. 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 I didn't do it.
The person responsible for the murder was probably a person with a car. And secondly, he was a person with a sexual problem. In view of all the evidence, it is clear, isn't it, that on the day that the murder took place, the accused was a person with a sexual problem. He is also a person with a car. You also have to consider whether the accused was able to give such accurate details of the murder from what he had learned from the police, or whether he was able to give those details because he was actually there. In his closing address, the counsel for the prosecution argued that the defense was attempting to ride two horses. They have their client saying, "I didn't do it, but if I did, it was because of diminished responsibility. Now make of this what you will."
Is it good they're taking so long?
Oh, yes. I think we were well served by Mr. Waddington. He'll have given them a lot to think about. In the end, it'll probably be decided on Stefan's confession.
What about the carpet?
I really do have to go.
Mum, just for a moment, to get away from all this. I have missed you very much, and I hope that you are keeping as well as can be expected in such trying times.
On the count of murder, what is your verdict? Please answer only guilty or not guilty.
Guilty.
And is that the verdict of you all, or by a majority?
By a majority.
How many of you agreed to that verdict? How many dissented?
10 agreed and 2 dissented.
Stefan Ivan Kiszko, you have been found guilty of a most brutal murder. You will go to prison for life. Take him down.
Court is adjourned.
That's all, lads. Come on, if you're coming down.
Right, in you go. Come on, Joe. Right, I'll leave the door open.
I can't tell him about the appeal. That it might be next year. Everything I write, I can only see it giving him more pain. Just our simple life here that goes on without him. When he should be here.
And because you've been seen to be at risk, under Section 43, we will, for your own safety, segregate you from the main body of prisoners. Any questions?
Wer hat das gemacht? Wer hat das gemacht? Scheißkerle, Scheißkerle! Yes, I know speak English. The language of the people who did this to you. Charlotte. Charlotte, come here.
Beasts. That's what they call us. Sexual offenders. They hate us. They can't get at me again. I'm in solitary, 23 hours a day. Then an hour's exercise with all the other beasts.
When the appeal comes, they will see it was all wrong.
I can't be in here. I just can't.
I don't want to build any hopes. The Court of Appeal won't be three nice old judges trying to make a wrong right. They'll want new evidence.
And now, the alibi. I remember that I was reading an article to Stefan.
I understand. You want to do whatever you can. The jury rejected Stefan's alibi. There's no point in just elaborating on what they've already heard. I'm afraid we might have to look at limiting his appeal. Scaling it down to diminished responsibility.
Birthday. They wouldn't let me send presents.
He's always loved trees.
It'll be here for him when he gets out.
Come on, kids, go. Let's go. Take no notice of it. Keep walking.
just sent him a letter. No one came. All alone in a cell, just a letter. He won't be able to do this.
Can we appeal again?
He won't live through this.
We will never give up. Never.
Why? Why did you have to say I was in the hospital when I wasn't? Why? You have no idea what it's like to be in here. No idea. And you put me in here. You, Mum. You.
Stefan.
No. She confused everyone. Right from the start when they first came round, she had to jump in. Why did you do it? Why I was going to tell them the truth? Why?
Stefan. Oh. Let him. Let him.
Mum. Mum. Mum.
I'm Stefan's probation officer. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll ever be let out on probation, but I can liaise with you about his progress.
My son is innocent. We'll get a new lawyer. And I want to know what else I can do next to get him out.
Mrs. Kiszko, my job is to help Stefan come to terms with the fact that he's not going to get out. Believe me, for the first 5 or 6 years, it's not good for them to look too far into the future.
Dear Mum, we had baked beans and bread and butter for breakfast. For dinner, we had fish stew and cake, plus a bread roll. At tea time, we had sausage roll, cake, bread and butter and tea. For the last few days, it has been raining. That's all the news for today. Please don't worry about me.
How can you do this? You know he didn't do it. You know that. You give him back. You give him back to me. Damn you! Damn you!
See? Cacked himself.
Get up on your feet. I said get up on your feet, Kiszko.
Oh, he stinks. Clothes, That in-house stinks.
We'll have to come and clean it up. Well, now we're going to make life easier for us. And a fucking sight harder for you.
Dirty bugger. Cack yourself at home, do you? There's shit everywhere. Leaving it to others to clean up for him. He's got shit all down his legs. Dirty bastard. Cacked everywhere. Up his back and down his leg. Stinks. Stinks, you dirty bastard. Cacky ass. Ah! Dirty bastard! Shit himself! Cacked everywhere, all down his back! Ah! Don't. Please. Don't. Ah! No, please.
Unable to think or act for himself. Indiscriminate soiling of himself. Shows no self-respect or initiative. How he'll be after this, I don't know, but he will not be seen to be in need of psychiatric treatment unless he admits to having a problem. Mrs. Kiszko. There's a strong chance he'll do as you say. I want you to get him to admit to his crime. To change his plea to guilty. If he does, there's the possibility of pursuing further appeals to have the killing seen as manslaughter. Then we can get him the treatment that he needs, and perhaps one day he can be released back into society. But until he confesses, none of us, medical staff, prison officers, probation service, can begin to help him. And Stefan is in need of a lot of help. It's very much up to you.
Perhaps it is the only way. Everyone is saying the same thing. The doctors too.
To tell him to lie? So he can rot in prison for 20 years instead of 30. For something he didn't do. No. Never. British justice. It's time Stefan got some.
In all honesty, I'd have to tell you what all the other solicitors have told you. You'd be wasting your money.
It's my money to waste. Just tell me what else I can do.
Well, you'd have to petition the Home Secretary for a referral back to the Court of Appeal. But without substantial new evidence, there's very little point in trying.
I could write to Mrs. Thatcher. She is a mother with a son. She will understand. And I could write to the European Court of Human Rights. Is there anybody else?
I really am very sorry. I wish there was some hope that I could give you, but I don't see that there's anything more to be done.
Thank you.
hundreds of miles away.
Why? Why did they move you there?
Can't be any worse than this place.
We'll explain about the visiting. They can't expect the disabled to travel that far.
No. We'll come every month. You know that.
You found a new solicitor?
We've seen so many, but none of them...
None of them good enough men yet.
Possible Argentine submarines and probable Argentine aircraft. We wondered if it wouldn't have been much safer to unload it at night. We got out of the way of the air attacks during the day, steaming up.
Look, I can squeeze you in a week tomorrow.
It's so daft. Gunboats is from another time.
Top 3 need calling now. Mrs. Iverson's been rearrested. She's in cells waiting interview. The courts have a query about the Arnold case, and the Law Society want an answer on a legal aid application.
Mr. Malone, I'm Mrs. Kiszko. I wrote to you about my son,
Mrs.
Stefan.
Kiszko, please.
Kiszko.
Tomorrow week.
About Stefan.
Stefan, yes.
Come through. I don't want paying because I can't promise I can do anything for you.
Mr. Malone, my son did not do this.
I'll get your last solicitor to send everything over. I'll give it a read, and then I'll tell you if I think I can help.
Thank you. I've been writing all over. I worked my way through the telephone book. So many solicitors.
And who's looking out for you?
I have my sister.
And them moving Stefan down south.
I have had enough of what you call a joke. So whoever you are telling to keep quiet, ask them to alleviate my circumstances and let me out. Yes, Mum, you could help me get out of prison. Because believe me, soon enough you'll have to do what I tell you to do. And don't come here on your next visit and tell lies. All my love, Stefan. That's him. Killed 2 little girls, one in Scotland, one in Manchester. Both the bodies found on moorland. I told my probation officer, but he didn't want to know. It needs investigating. It's him. I know it's him.
Have you joined in with any of the activities yet?
So how are you going to investigate it? How? What are you doing to get me out of here? Nothing. You're doing nothing to get me out. You're just leaving me. You're not doing anything. Why don't you do something to get me out of here?
For his birthday, I plan fun every year. That was number 1. This is number 7.
I've had a read of everything. There's a lot that doesn't seem right. I can't see any obvious way at the moment, but I'd like to try and help.
Yesterday, the undertakers called for one prisoner. He had passed away with no suspicious circumstances. I can stand a lot of things, but this shocked me.
All right. So if Stefan Kiszko was as disabled as you say he was, he could never have got up here. What else have you got?
Stefan's doctor wasn't the only witness not called. 3 others all identified the same car in the lay-by at the time of the murder. And it wasn't Stefan's car.
That's it?
We've got a private detective. He keeps coming up against the same problem. It happened a very long time ago.
If I'm going to stand up for him in an appeal court, you're going to have to find me something to fight with.
I've spoken with the specialist about the testosterone injections that Stefan was receiving at the time of the murder. He absolutely refutes there can be any link between the injections and a change in Stefan's behavior. It was the link that everybody wanted to believe in, and it was totally false.
Mr. Malone, he stopped writing. He told the prison authorities he doesn't want to see me again.
It's very important. Whoever controls the weather controls the world.
Yes, they would do. It's a very good idea. And these voices you hear, they could talk about your dad.
He had X-ray machines in the kitchen ceiling. He used to copy me songs and give them to the boss at work.
At the Inland Revenue?
Yes. And he used to sell them on to Tom Jones and Andy Fairweather Low. They got to be famous and I got put in here. You dirty bastard. You dirty fat bugger. We know what you did. You looked up her skirt, you wanked on her knickers, you dirty fat bastard. Do you know he shat himself? You dirty bugger.
And do you think your mother's in on it too? Is that why you won't see her? Is that why you won't see her?
It's a confused pattern with several conflicting conclusions. His reasoning does seem odd and certainly resembles schizophrenia. And of course with his persistent false ideas of innocence.
Confused about certain things he may be, but he's always been very clear about one thing. He didn't do it.
Mr. Malone, it's unlikely, given Kiszko's refusal to come to terms with his crime, that we can do much for him, apart from stabilizing him with drugs. But there is also the strong possibility that he is just manipulating.
His mother thinks he's very ill.
Yes, well, that's what mothers are for.
But if there are obvious signs of mental illness...
Mr. Malone, as a professional, I'm sure you're aware that prison is a harsh experience. Some prisoners just don't cope, and I'm afraid Stefan Kiszko is one of them.
Are you next of kin, love? There's a form to fill in.
Sabrina's not really been very well, but you've not written her a letter to see how she's doing. She might come and visit you. You fat bastard, Stefan ate all the pies. She said she might come and see you, but she can't come until she's better.
Dear Stefan, this is just to let you know that I'm okay. And Freda is okay too. We now have a few days of very warm and sunny weather, and I can wear my summer dresses. It is cold today, but we must be thankful that we are not snowed in like those poor people in Scotland. And my dear, dear son, I do love you so much and miss you and think of you every minute of every day.
Called a psychiatric unit.
I have to get to him. I have to get to him.
Charlotte. He's going to have to get through this on his own. And you're going to have to trust him to get through it on his own. If you try and do it for him, you're going to end up back in here. What you've got to do now is get better, stronger. He needs you fitting well on the outside.
Mr. Malone, is there any hope?
We're not going to give up. And I know you won't.
You haven't dug it deep enough.
It should be okay, Mrs. Kiszko.
No, I don't think so, no.
There might just be a way forward. And believe it or not, it might just be thanks to Margaret Hilda Thatcher.
She made that man Home Secretary.
Charlotte, what we've got to do is make him bend over backwards not to obstruct a new petition to look into Stefan's case.
And that is how these things happen. My son's life depends on the same man. Again?
We have to find a way of saying, Mrs. Kiszko, how can he, as Home Secretary, make a disinterested decision on a trial that was dependent on his own conduct and judgment, so that he has to let it go through?
It's going to have to be one hell of a letter, then.
Given the complication of the Home Secretary's previous involvement in the case, he will be the first to appreciate that there's a particular need for a visibly disinterested decision to be made. Let me make it clear that I do not for a moment anticipate a decision taken in less than good faith.
Home Secretary.
Stefan?
Nothing.
There's nothing here with Kiszko on it, sir.
Molseed. That was the name of the little girl. These masses of it.
A police review, Mr. Malone calls it. He says they are good men, and they will look at the evidence again. But this time, he will be there to make sure they look at everything. He's very optimistic. Stefan, do you know who I am?
So are you telling me that you lied? That you made it all up? You didn't see a man expose himself?
I just went along with everyone else. We were just silly kids. We didn't think it'd end up in court.
Do you realise the seriousness of what you did?
Of course I do now. I was only a kid then. I feel awful.
Just like the others. There was no flasher that night. Kiszko didn't expose himself to anyone.
So, we're left with the indecent exposure in daylight. Possibly an accident.
Whole world had it in for him, didn't they, eh?
Oh, Stefan. You've been at the Nivea again. There, it's all right. Shh. Stefan, come on. Stefan, do you know what's happening today? We're pushed for beds. You're going back to an ordinary prison. If you keep up with the medication, the doctors think you'll do just fine. Come on now. This'll help. And then we'll get you cleaned up, eh? That's me, man. He's no trouble.
Okay.
Never has been, and he's well under. Now, these are very important. They're Stefan's letters. He doesn't go anywhere without them. He'll need to hold on to them during the journey.
Okay.
Gets very anxious if he can't find them.
Right.
Come on now, Stefan. In you go.
Have your bag, Stefan. Good man. Man, Stefan.
Kiszko, you said?
I did. The samples were taken on December 22nd, 1975.
Well, we'd have copies of everything. What exactly did you want?
Copies of everything.
When they arrested Stefan, they did forensic tests to match his semen against semen found on the little girl's clothes. The samples didn't match.
Who stopped it from coming out? Who did this? Who knew?
The forensic scientists? The police?
Or it could have been a dreadful mistake. But there's one thing that can't be argued away. Stefan's confession. How did Stefan make such an accurate confession to a murder he didn't do? And to exposing himself in an incident that never happened?
They tricked him. They tricked him.
Kiszko?
Kiszko, behave yourself, okay? Kiszko! Stefan, you're doing?
And the result is that it has been shown that this man
cannot produce sperm. This man, therefore, cannot have been the person responsible for ejaculating over the little girl's knickers and skirt, and consequently cannot have been the murderer. For those reasons, this appeal must be allowed, and the conviction quashed as being unsafe and unsatisfactory.
Happy?
Letters and phone calls from around the world, but not one to say they are sorry for what they did to Stefan. Mr. Malone, I'm not ungrateful. I didn't think it would be so hard.
Charlotte, it's all right. Thank God for your anger.
If he doesn't know who I am.
You must be very bitter about it all.
Has anyone apologised to you?
What's you going to do next? What does your mother feel about your release?
Very happy.
Hello, Mum.
It's all right.
Thank you very much, Chair.
There are 16 of them. One for each year. Number 1 is there.